Hey everyone, this is Lori Delcradecki, and today we are going to talk about lesson 11. It is connecting with your crowd. So it's going to be audience engagement techniques. And this is going to delve into strategies for making your speech or your lesson interactive, such as asking rhetorical questions, incorporating storytelling, and even encouraging audience participation if that's appropriate during what you're teaching. And so raise your hand if you've ever been in a presentation where you felt like a passive spectator, like not just sitting there, but you're just waiting for the clock to run out. Now, keep your hand up if you've ever been in a presentation where you were asked a question, told a story that you could relate to, or you even felt so connected that you lost track of time. What's the difference? The first was a lecture. The second was a conversation. The first was a broadcast. The second one was a relationship. The most impactful speakers don't just talk at their audience, they connect with the crowd. And so today we're going to move beyond the monologue and into the dialogue. So once again, my topic is connecting with your crowd, audience engagement techniques. We're going to explore the essential strategies that's going to turn your passive audience into active participants. And so, because truly a speech that's going to be remembered isn't about what you say. It's about what your audience feels, what they think, and what they do because of what you said. Engagement is the key to creating a lasting impression and driving your message home. And so my goal is to equip you with a toolkit of practical yet powerful and easy to implement techniques that's going to transform your next speech from a performance into a collaborative experience. And so we're going to make your audience feel seen. We're going to make them feel heard, and we're going to make them feel valued. So in doing so, we're going to unlock a new level of impact. And so we're going to start with the why, the psychology behind the engagement. And then we're going to dive into the practical how, like covering the rhetorical questions and storytelling and encouraging direct participation. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to make it all feel natural and authentic. And so part one, the why, that's the psychology of engagement. And so you want to take people from passive receiver to active participant. So the human brain is simply just not wired for passive reception. We are wired to be active. We're wired to engage, and we're wired to solve problems. And so when your audience is just sitting there, taking in information, their minds have a tendency to wander. Have you ever spoken at an event and you see people start to fall asleep? Or you're in church and you start to fall asleep, or your mind starts to wander. So, a lot of times, because the speaker or preacher isn't engaging with the audience, with the crowd. And so, people tend to get distracted, their attention span dwindles. But engagement techniques are designed to disrupt that passivity and activate people's minds. It turns your listeners from spectators into co-conspirators in that communication process. And so think about the most powerful conversations that you've ever had. There's a two-way street. By engaging your audience, you create a shared experience. And you're no longer just delivering information. You're creating a moment all together. And this builds a sense of camaraderie and connection that makes your message feel more personal and makes it more relevant to each person in the room. And so when your audience participates, their brain activity increases. They're not just hearing the information, they're processing it, they're connecting to it, and they're cementing it into their memory. Have you ever left church like when you were a child? I know when I got home from church when I was a child, my mom would ask, "What'd you learn today?" Can you remember what you learned just an hour ago, 30 minutes ago? An audience that's actively thinking about your rhetorical question or relating to your story is an audience that will remember your core message long after your speech is over. So that engagement is a powerful memory maker. It's the difference between hearing a fact and owning a conviction. And so finally, when you invite your audience to participate, you show that you respect them. You value their input, their thoughts, and their attention. And it isn't about you showing how smart you are. It's about you helping them to learn and grow. That respect builds an incredible amount of trust and rapport. And it makes them more open and receptive to everything that you have to say. And so next we're going to talk about the how-to, the practical engagement techniques. So the first part I'm going to talk to you about is the rhetorical question. So rhetorical questions are questions that you ask without expecting an actual verbal answer, but with full expectation that your audience answers it in their own minds. And so start with a question that grabs their attention and makes them feel personally involved. For example, have you ever felt like your message was getting lost in the noise? This immediately makes them think yes, and is going to make them lean in and be ready for the solution that you're about to provide. So during your speech or your lesson or your message, use rhetorical questions to transition between points or to signal an important takeaway. So what does this data mean for our team's strategy? This prompts them to process the information and think ahead. And then you want to end the thought with a thought-provoking question. So you could conclude with a question that inspires reflection and action. Like, what is one step you'll take today to communicate with more simplicity? This is going to leave them with a task, not just a feeling. So another pro tip is use pauses after you ask a rhetorical question. Let the silence do the work. Give them a few seconds to think of their own answer. And so another way is the universal language of storytelling. We're all wired for stories. Stories is how we make sense of the world. Remember Jesus spoke in parables? Those are stories, right? Tell personal stories. Share a relatable personal anecdote that illustrates a key point. This makes you human. It helps you to build empathy, and it makes your message stick. For example, instead of saying simplicity is important, you could say, I once spent an entire week trying to fix a technical problem, only to realize that the solution was incredibly simple. I had to learn that the hard way, and that sometimes less is more. You could also tell case studies or customer stories or people in your audience that you've coached, that you've taught, use their stories without divulging personal information. So you could use a success story from your company, a real world example to demonstrate the impact of your idea. This provides social proof, but it also makes your concepts tangible. But you want to keep it concise. A great story does not have to be long. It should have a clear beginning, a conflict or challenge, and a resolution that leads to that core message. And so another pro tip is using descriptive language and emotion to bring your story to life. The goal is for your audience to not just hear the story, but to feel it. And so another technique is encouraging that direct participation. This is where you turn that monologue into a true dialogue. It requires courage, and it's best used when it's appropriate for the context, but the payoff is huge. So one of the easy ways is simple show of hands. It's the easiest way to get engagement. Ask a simple yes or no question to gauge understanding or get a feel for the room. Raise your hand if you've ever felt nervous before a speech. This is a low risk and immediately gets people involved. Also, think, pair, share. This is great for workshops or smaller groups. You can ask a thought-provoking question and give them a minute or two to think about it, and then have them turn to a neighbor and discuss that for a minute, and then ask a few pairs to share their takeaways. You can also do that in like Sunday school if you're teaching, or if another class if you're teaching a class. You can also do live polling. There's tools that you can use, or even just a simple show of hands to get real-time data from your audience. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident do you feel about your vocal delivery? And so when people raise their hands or put it on a paper and turn it in or whatever, it makes the data directly relevant to them and makes your speech feel tailored. So then you can also use a Q&A session. This should be a planned part of your speech if you can. It's not just an afterthought. Frame it as a time to have direct conversation. When you receive a question, you repeat it back to the audience to ensure everyone has heard it before you answer. And so always set expectations for the participation at the beginning. If you're going to ask for a show of hands, then tell them. If you want them to hold questions till the end, also let them know that at the beginning. This prevents awkward moments and keeps the flow going smoothly. So today we've learned that a great speech isn't about just what you know, it's about how you connect. And we've explored the power of rhetorical questions to activate their minds, the universal language of storytelling to build empathy, and practical ways to encourage direct participation to transform your audience from spectators into collaborators. Remember that your audience is not there to simply receive information. They're there to engage with you, to be inspired, and to be changed. And so by using these techniques, you show them that you value their presence as well as their participation. You're not just giving a speech, you're creating a conversation. And that's where true connection and learning and impact happen. And so I challenge you to identify one engagement technique that you will use in your next presentation or message. Don't wait. Don't plan it, just act. Whether it's a simple rhetorical question or whether it's a personal anecdote, take that first step towards making your speech a shared experience. Because when you do connect with your crowd, you don't just win their attention, you're going to win their hearts as well as their minds. So go out and speak with connection. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. And I will see you next time in the next lesson. Let me know what you've learned from this.